My name is Isabel Hart. I'm 28, and I make a living turning chaos into campaigns. As a marketing consultant, I build order out of noise, finding the pattern beneath people's indecision. Funny thing is, I never thought I'd have to use that same skill on my own relationship. Daniel and I had been living together in my apartment downtown for about a year and a half. On paper, everything looked stable. We split the bills, alternated dinner nights, had our little rituals, the Tuesday wine, the Saturday market, the quiet Sundays where he'd read on the balcony while I worked on client reports. It was a calm kind of love, predictable, safe, until that Tuesday night. He came into my office while I was finalizing a pitch deck. I remember because the light from my monitor washed his face in pale blue and he looked almost translucent, like someone rehearsing how to disappear. "Hey," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "You okay?" He lingered in the doorway. His hands were clasped together the way people hold their breath. "Can we talk?" Those three words, the modern relationship's gunshot. I saved my file, turned in my chair, and faced him. He was standing straight, voice too careful, eyes darting between me and the floor. "Isabel, I need to be completely honest with you about something." There it was, completely honest, a phrase that always comes right before the demolition starts. He inhaled like he was about to dive underwater. "I have feelings for you, just not romantic ones. I care about you deeply, I really do, but it's not the same kind of love anymore, and you deserve that. You deserve someone who feels it fully." For a second, I thought I misheard him. The clock on the wall ticked. The world didn't fall apart, it just went eerily still. "Oh," I said finally, "okay." Daniel blinked. He seemed almost offended by my composure. "That's it? You're not angry?" "I appreciate you telling me," I said, keeping my tone level. "Thanks for being honest." I turned back to my computer. That's when I saw it, his confusion. He was expecting a scene, tears, begging, some emotional theater he could later describe to his friends as really hard but necessary. Instead, I gave him professional courtesy. He lingered. "You're not going to say anything else?" "What would you like me to say?" I asked quietly. "You've clarified how you feel. That's useful information." The silence after that stretched long enough to make even the air uncomfortable. He left, muttering something about needing a walk. When the door closed, I just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a small velvet box. The ring was still inside, simple, elegant, gold with a tiny emerald. I'd bought it 3 weeks earlier. It was supposed to be for our anniversary next month. Now it was just data, evidence of misplaced confidence. I closed the box and tucked it back in. Later that night, I heard him on the phone in the living room. His voice had that faux, humble tone people use when they want to sound noble. "Yeah, I just told her everything. It felt right, you know. I didn't want to lie anymore. She actually handled it really well. She's so mature about it." They laughed. His friend said something about how emotionally evolved he was, how refreshing it was to see a man communicate clearly. I closed my eyes and exhaled, not from sadness, more like recognition. I'd spent years decoding market trends, and now I could see it again. The pattern. The self-congratulation disguised as virtue. Honesty without empathy isn't courage, it's performance art. The next morning, the routine played out like usual. He made coffee, I sliced fruit. For a second, it almost felt normal, until he said too casually, "I'm glad we can still be friends." Friends. The word hung there like a deflated balloon. "Sure," I said, taking my mug. "Friends." He smiled, relieved. Maybe he thought the worst was over. But while he sipped his coffee, I was calculating. Not revenge, just the math of recalibration. What friendship really meant. How many quiet compromises I'd made that no longer made sense under that label. When he left for work, I opened my budgeting spreadsheet. I started reassigning numbers. Rent, utilities, groceries. My name was on everything. He'd always contributed, but I'd covered the margins, the invisible expenses that made our life comfortable. I realized how much emotional labor has an invoice, even if no one ever sends it. That evening, he came home like nothing had changed. "Want to watch our show tonight?" he asked. "Not tonight," I said gently. "I've got some things to figure out." He frowned. "Are you upset?" "No," I smiled. "Just adjusting." He hesitated, as if he wanted to argue, then gave up and went to his studio corner, pretending to edit photos on his laptop. I watched him from across the room. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was mathematical now, measurable. I thought about how often he'd described our relationship as easy. Easy for him, maybe. I was the structure that made it seem effortless. By midnight, I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow and deliberate. I whispered the sentence out loud, not for him, but for me. Honesty without empathy is just cruelty in formal wear. It felt truer than anything he'd said all night. The next day, I returned the ring. The jeweler looked sympathetic, but I was oddly calm. Watching that $3,000 hit my account felt less like heartbreak and more like balance restoration. Sometimes the universe doesn't take sides. It just keeps the books. When I got home, Daniel was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He smiled when he saw me. "You seem lighter today," he said. "I am," I replied. "I think clarity has a cleansing effect." He didn't know that clarity also had a cost, and I was about to show him exactly how expensive friendship could be. The first thing I did was set an alarm for 6:30 a.m., not because I needed it, but because Daniel did. He never woke up with his first alarm. He hit snooze 3 times and relied on the sound of the espresso machine to pull him into consciousness. For 18 months, I'd left the apartment at 7:45 with 2 cups, his double oat latte with vanilla syrup, my Americano without sugar. That morning, I brewed 1 cup. He shuffled out in a t-shirt, hair a quiet storm. "Machine broken?" "No," I said, capping my travel mug. "I made mine." He blinked at the empty counter like the rest of his drink would materialize if he stared hard enough. "You're not having one?" "I am," I said, holding it up. "This one." He laughed, unsure. "Okay, but could you—" "Daniel," I said gently, "friends make their own coffee." He tried on a grin that didn't fit him anymore. "Right, friends." He reached for the vanilla syrup, realized it was gone, and checked the fridge the way you look for a person who's already left. The bottle had been quietly retired to the recycling bin last night. While he was searching, I opened my laptop and moved to the dining table, where our shared budget sheet stared back at me, newly honest. Under household consumables, I had replaced the line item, shared toiletry restock, Izzy, with personal care. Each handles their own. It felt like adjusting the scope of a contract. No malice, only clarity. He padded toward the bathroom. A beat later, his voice, "Izzy?" "Yes?" "Where's the shampoo? The nice one?" "In the cabinet. Mine's labeled." I paused. "Drugstore aisle has great options." He reappeared, holding a generic bottle like a counterfeit. "Since when?" "Since now," I said, closing a cell on the spreadsheet. I realized I was buying things for a relationship that no longer exists. He stared at the label like it had personally insulted him. "I didn't know we were keeping track of shampoo." "We weren't," I said. "I was giving. That's different." He opened his mouth, found nothing, and closed it again. By lunch, the experiment had its first control condition: technology. He'd messaged me from his studio downstairs. "Daniel, Mac's making that grinding noise again. Can you look at it tonight?" I typed back. "Me. Best Buy runs diagnostics. Geek Squad's good." He sent a thinking emoji then. "Daniel, but you always fix it." For a long time, I was his IT department, the universal hotline for printer tantrums, software updates. Why is the cloud yelling at me? I would slide into his chair, solve the problem, and kiss his forehead like a small ceremony. Me. I did that when we were dating. Friends don't typically provide free tech support. There was a pause long enough to be a sentence. He came upstairs early, laptop tucked under his arm, eyes performing nonchalance. "So, about the laptop." "Daniel," I said, "take it in. They'll help." He hovered behind me, reading the screen over my shoulder, a deck for a financial services client. "You're really busy," he said, as if discovering I had a life that continued in his absence. "I am," I said, and meant it. He retreated to the couch, opening his laptop with theatrical sighs, as if hardware might respond to pity. After a few minutes, the apartment filled with the small clicks of his frustration. "Can we at least watch our show tonight?" he asked. "Not tonight," I said, "meeting early." "What about tomorrow?" "I'll let you know." He fell back into the cushions. "You used to love watching with me." "I used to be your girlfriend." He stared at the ceiling like it might explain me. That evening, I unsubscribed him from my Prime, Netflix, Spotify, HBO. A handful of quiet exits. Within an hour, the first message arrived. "Daniel, did Spotify log me out?" Me. "I removed shared accounts." "Couples share. Friends get their own." "Daniel, that's petty." Me. "That's appropriate." He didn't respond, but I heard him moving through the living room. Restless, like someone discovering his favorite road had become a tollway overnight. The next morning, the kitchen had a new geography. He stood before the stove as if the knobs were little riddles. "Are you making pancakes?" he asked, watching the batter curl at the edges. For me, I said. There's more mix if you want to make yours after I'm done. He blinked. You always make enough for two. I used to. A muscle in his jaw worked. So I have to make my own breakfast now? That's how I've always done it, I said. For me. He glanced at the single plate I'd set out. You liked cooking for me. I liked who I thought I was cooking for. He swallowed whatever he wanted to say and opened a cabinet. Inside, the pantry looked newly unfamiliar. No imported almond croissants, no pricey granola, no $12 honey in a ceramic jar. Just basics. Enough. Fair. He closed the door like it had closed on him. That afternoon, he texted again. Daniel, my shoot's running late. Could you order the camera battery you got last time? I don't remember which one. I sent him the product link. Here's the exact model. You can grab it under your own Prime. Daniel, right, got it. Me. And reimbursement for the last two was never settled. I've added it to the expense sheet under Daniel, gear. He didn't text back. When I came home that night, the apartment felt like a scene between scenes. He was perched at the edge of the couch, as if caught deciding whether to be angry or agreeable. I talked to Nate, he said, his friend with the opinions. He says you're punishing me. I'm recalibrating. It feels punitive. Lots of things feel like punishment when we're used to being overpaid. He rubbed his face. I thought we said we'd be friends. We did. I'm being friendly. I'm communicating clearly. I'm respecting your autonomy, I said lightly, and watched the words land. He'd used those same phrases last night like talismans. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Isabel, you're different. I'm the same, I said. I'm just returning everything to its rightful owner. He looked up. What does that even mean? The labor, the planning, the quiet things that made your life easy. They belong to the version of us you opted out of. His mouth flattened into a line. So what? I just lost all the perks? You didn't lose them, I said. You returned them. He laughed once, brittle. Okay. He stood. Okay. He paced to the balcony door and back, finally stopping near the hallway. Are we still doing Sunday dinner with your sister? I think I'll go alone this week. He nodded too many times. Right, that makes sense. Boundaries. I almost felt sorry for him. The way people look when the rules change and nobody announced it, even though the announcement was the first thing they said. Around midnight, his laptop whirred into complaint again. He sighed loudly, a sound meant to travel. I didn't get up. He peered into my office. The Best Buy closes at 9. Tomorrow, then. You really won't even take a quick look? I turned in my chair and gave him my full attention, the way you do for a friend at the end of a bad day. Daniel, you asked for friendship. I'm meeting you there. Something flickered across his face, not anger, comprehension, the kind that arrives like a slow sunrise, and with it, the shadows. Over the next week, the apartment kept inventing new ways to tell the truth. I replaced the $80 serum with a drugstore moisturizer. The $45 shampoo became the kind every brand sells. The bathroom lost its cinnamon and rose smell and smelled like soap, honest, unapologetic. We split groceries at the register. I bought my things. He bought his. And for the first time, he noticed how many shared items weren't actually shared. If the experiment had a soundtrack, it was the small, confused noises he made as he discovered the edges of his independence. The way he'd stand in the kitchen with a grocery list and a pencil, trying to remember the brand of oat milk he insisted he didn't care about, until it wasn't there. On Thursday, I posted a sticky note to the fridge. Utilities auto debit now split 50-50. Amounts in the sheet. He stood staring at it like a memo from a company that had stopped being a family. That night, he tried a new tactic. Contrition wrapped in charm. He knocked on my office door, leaning on the frame in that way he used to when flirting. Hey, he said. I'm ordering Thai. Want anything? I'm good, thanks. I'll get your usual, my treat. I ate earlier, I said, but thank you. He shifted. You hungry later? We could... Good night, Daniel. He pushed air through his teeth, a sound like surrender's prelude. Okay, good night. After he went to bed, I sat in the quiet for a long time and let the data tell its story. He had expected our life to continue with the same amenities, just rebranded. He thought the label was the only thing that would change. But labels are promises, and I was finally making mine accurate. Before I turned off the lamp, I opened a new tab and saved a listing for a condo 12 stops away. Light-soaked, small, mine. It wasn't a plan yet, just a possibility with high resolution. In the doorway, I caught my reflection in the dark glass, eyes clear, shoulders relaxed. I didn't look like a woman who'd been abandoned. I looked like a woman who had stopped abandoning herself. By the third week of our friendship, The air in the apartment had changed texture. It wasn't tense exactly, it was just thinner, like someone had turned down the oxygen. Daniel kept trying to pretend everything was normal. I let him. That was part of the experiment, too. You learn more from watching what people do with silence than from what they say in it. Then came his birthday. In the past, I'd spent weeks planning the perfect celebration, personal, cinematic, meticulously detailed. For his 25th, I'd filled our living room with Polaroids of our travels and booked a rooftop dinner overlooking the river. For his 26th, I'd rented a projector and turned our balcony into a movie night under fairy lights. He'd once told me I made life feel curated. Now, as he scrolled on his phone that morning, waiting for something magical to appear, I simply said, "Happy birthday," and handed him a small envelope. He smiled, expecting a sentimentality. Then his expression stalled. Inside was a $25 Target gift card. "Thanks," he said slowly, searching my face for irony. "You're welcome," I said. "It's practical." He chuckled, testing the mood. "So, no clues to a surprise party? Or are you going for misdirection this year?" "No surprises," I said, reaching for my coffee mug. "We could grab dinner later if you want. Italian place around the corner. Split the bill." The pause that followed was almost elegant in its awkwardness. "Split the bill?" he repeated, like I'd mispronounced the word birthday. "Yes, friends usually split bills." He stared at the gift card as though it had just started speaking. "Izzy, it's my birthday." "Exactly," I said. "That's why I got you the card. So dinner's already half covered." He gave a short laugh, but it sounded more like disbelief trying on humor. "You're serious." "Completely." He didn't argue. He just sat there, blinking, like a computer processing incompatible data. I spent most of the day at work, deliberately busy. My phone stayed silent, no plans confirmed. Around 6, I received a text. "Daniel, never mind about dinner. Got takeout." Me. "Okay, enjoy your night." When I got home at 10:30, the smell of Thai food and wilted basil still hung in the air. The coffee table was cluttered with empty containers and a single cupcake with its candle half burnt. Daniel was on the couch, watching a muted movie. The light from the screen made his face look almost ghostly. He didn't turn when I came in. "You didn't even ask how my day was. I assumed you'd tell me if something was wrong." He laughed bitterly. "I can't believe this is you. You're treating me like a stranger." "No," I said, setting my bag down. "Like a friend. There's a difference." He finally turned. "You used to care." "I still care," I said softly, "just not in the way you want me to." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You don't get to just flip a switch, Izzy." I tilted my head. "You did." That landed. The truth always does. Quietly, like a dart finding its mark. I crossed the room and sat across from him, the low hum of the TV filling the silence. "You said you wanted friendship. I'm honoring that. This is what it looks like without the bonuses." He looked at the empty containers. "It feels cold." "Cold," I said, "is just warmth redistributed more fairly." For a second, I saw a flash of something in his expression. Panic, maybe. Not about losing me, but about losing convenience. He was realizing that the love he'd downgraded wasn't just affection, it was infrastructure. That night, after he went to bed, I opened my journal and made a small note in the margin. Even withdrawal can be a form of love, just redirected inward. The following week, the birthday fallout lingered. He moved through the apartment with exaggerated calm, waiting for me to snap out of it. One evening, I found him standing by the window, scrolling through old photos of us on his phone. The kind where we looked like the glossy version of ourselves, beach smiles, brunches, the illusion of forever. He didn't notice I was watching until I spoke. "Looking for something?" He startled slightly, then turned the screen toward me. "We were happy, weren't we?" "We were," I said, "until you decided happiness was optional." He exhaled, shoulders heavy. "I thought you'd at least, I don't know, fight for it." "Fight for what? A demotion?" His mouth opened, but no words came. I took the glass from his hand and set it on the counter. "Daniel, I'm not angry, truly, but you taught me something." "What's that?" "That sometimes people don't want honesty. They want absolution. You wanted to feel noble while leaving, and I gave you that. You didn't expect me to hold you accountable for the fine print." He stared at me, speechless. "Anyway," I said, pulling my hair into a bun, "friends don't owe each other closure. They just coexist until it stops feeling necessary." I went to my room and shut the door softly. The weekend arrived with small symbolic rebellions. I changed the Wi-Fi password and wrote it on the fridge under household shared access. I canceled our joint grocery delivery and split the accounts. By Sunday, he couldn't take the silence anymore. Are we seriously not doing Sunday pancakes? He asked, following me into the kitchen. I already ate. He stared at the empty skillet. You always make enough for both of us. I used to, I said, before I realized breakfast was just another unpaid service. You're being cruel, he said, voice shaking. No, I said, turning to face him fully. Cruel would be pretending nothing changed. He ran a hand through his hair. I feel like you're punishing me for being honest. Maybe, I said. You're just meeting the version of me you never bothered to know. He didn't reply. He just stared, like he was looking for the woman he remembered and couldn't find her. That night, while folding laundry, I found one of his old Polaroids tucked in the back of a drawer. It was from our first road trip, me half asleep, head on his shoulder, sunlight on my face. I almost smiled. Then I tore it in half. Closure doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it's as small and deliberate as a paper cut. When I stepped out into the living room later, Daniel was sitting with his sister Emma, who dropped by unannounced. Emma looked at me with polite awkwardness. Hey, Izzy, haven't seen you in a while. Work's been busy, I said. Daniel's eyes flicked to me. Unreadable. Yeah, she's been reorganizing. Emma frowned slightly. You two okay? We're great, I said, smiling. Just redefining terms. Daniel's jaw tightened, and I realized he finally understood. I wasn't waiting for him to fix anything. I was conducting an exit with precision. Later that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Calm, composed, unrecognizable even to myself. The woman who used to overextend for love was gone. What replaced her wasn't bitter, just balanced. And somewhere deep down, I knew the real birthday present hadn't been the gift card. It was the lesson. That friendship without reciprocity isn't kindness. It's servitude with better lighting. By the time February rolled around, even the walls had grown tired of our civility. The apartment had become a museum of polite detachment, the kind of place where nothing technically wrong ever happened, but everything felt faintly haunted. Daniel still talked like we were friends, the kind who might revisit things later. He'd hover in doorways, testing the boundaries he used to own. I let him try. Watching him bump into invisible fences he'd built himself was strangely satisfying. Then, one Thursday morning, he woke up sick. At first, it was just a cough, then a fever, then the kind of dramatic flu men get when the universe demands penance. He lay on the couch, surrounded by tissues and martyrdom. When I came home that evening, his voice was small and raspy. Hey, he croaked. Could you grab some medicine? I'm dying. I dropped my keys in the bowl. Pharmacy's 2 blocks away. He blinked. You're not serious. I am. Dayquil Isle. Can't miss it. He looked genuinely hurt. You used to take care of me when I was sick. I met his gaze evenly. I used to be in love with you. Silence, then a hollow laugh. Wow. I'm not being cruel, Daniel. I'm following the new terms you requested. His face softened, a flicker of recognition behind his exhaustion. You're really doing this, huh? Turning it off. I set my bag down and sat on the arm of the couch. I didn't turn it off. You unplugged it. I just stopped paying the electric bill. He didn't have a comeback for that. The next week, I told him I was making an offer on a condo in the suburbs. 2 bedrooms, east-facing windows, and no shared space haunted by unspoken expectations. You're moving out? He said, eyes wide. When the lease ends, yes. He blinked. You bought a place without even talking to me? I mentioned house hunting 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but I thought you meant casually. Since when do friends consult each other about real estate? That shut him up. He paced for a moment, then said, But what about this place? I mean, we built a life here. No, I said softly. I built it. You just lived in it. Something in his expression cracked. Not heartbreak, but realization. He was losing the structure that made him comfortable, the safety net disguised as affection. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a man cornered by his own reflection. Izzy, I think I made a mistake. I waited, calm, silent. He took a breath. What I said before about not having romantic feelings, I was wrong. I do love you. I really do. I've just been scared. Scared of what? I asked. Of failing, of settling down too soon, of not being enough. But I know now, you're the person I want. He sounded rehearsed, the same way he had the night he told me he didn't love me. I tilted my head. That's interesting timing. What do you mean? You didn't feel that way when the bills were paid, the meals were cooked, and everything ran smoothly. Now that you might have to handle life alone, suddenly love's back on the table? His jaw clenched. You think I'm just scared of being on my own? I think, I said, you miss being taken care of. He looked like I'd slapped him. That's not fair. Neither was the relationship, I said quietly. I just didn't notice because I was too busy making it functional. He dropped onto the couch, hands covering his face. I messed this up, didn't I? Yes, I said simply, but not in the way you think. You didn't lose me because you were honest. You lost me because you were selfish in the name of honesty. He exhaled hard. So that's it? You're just done? I was done 4 months ago, I said. You're just catching up. He looked up, eyes red, voice shaking. I want to try again. I appreciate that, I said softly, but I can't love a man who needs loss to feel gratitude. He flinched. I stood, gathered the empty mug from the table, and started toward the kitchen. Wait, he said, voice breaking. So this is really it? I turned, meeting his gaze one last time. No, Daniel, that was really it. This is peace. For a few days, things went quiet. Then one evening, his sister Emma stopped by to help him pack up old equipment. She waited until he left the room to grab tape before pulling me aside. Izzy, she whispered, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I think you deserve to know. Know what? She looked uneasy. Daniel found the ring. My heart stilled. What ring? The engagement ring, she said softly. He told me about it. Said he found the receipt in your desk drawer, like a month before your talk. I blinked. Everything, the timing, his guilt, his sudden honesty, fell into place. Emma continued, He freaked out. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of pressure. I think that's why he had that whole conversation about feelings changing. He panicked. The room blurred for a moment, like the air itself was rewinding. I thanked her quietly. She squeezed my hand before leaving. When Daniel came back into the room, cheerful and oblivious, I just looked at him, really looked. The man who'd claimed to value honesty had only ever weaponized it to avoid accountability. Did you know I was going to propose? I asked calmly. He froze mid-step. What? Emma told me you found the receipt, before you gave me your little speech about not having romantic feelings. Color drained from his face. Izzy. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. Just answer. He swallowed. I saw it by accident. I didn't mean to. And you decided the best way to handle it was to demote me from fiancé to roommate? He winced. I didn't know what else to do. You could have talked to me. I was scared you'd be hurt. I laughed. One sharp exhale that felt almost kind. You mean scared I'd say yes? He stared at the floor, voice cracking. I thought maybe if we stayed friends, I'd figure it out eventually. Eventually, I repeated. Daniel, you had 2.5 years of eventually. You didn't need more time. You needed courage. He covered his face again, words muffled. I'm sorry. I'm not, I said quietly, because now I know exactly who you are and who I was pretending you could be. I picked up my coat, my keys, and walked toward the door. Where are you going? He asked, desperate. To close on my condo, I said. You should probably start packing. That night, when I finally lay in my new place, surrounded by unopened boxes and quiet, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires hope, and I'd already spent mine. The city outside my window hummed softly, as if approving the exchange. One apartment full of echoes for a home full of space. In the stillness, I whispered to myself, love doesn't always end in fire. Sometimes it ends in math, when the equation stops balancing and you finally stop pretending it does. It's strange how endings rarely arrive with thunder. Sometimes they come dressed as paperwork. The final signature on a lease, a key sliding off a ring, the quiet sound of a door unlocking for the last time. 2 weeks after confronting Daniel, I moved into my condo, a small, sunlit space on the edge of the city, nothing fancy, but everything was mine. The first morning, I woke to the sound of birds instead of his phone alarms. No half-drunk lattes on the counter. No, hey babe, did you see my charger? Echoing down the hall. Just light and quiet. It felt like inhaling after holding my breath for 2 years. I'd left him a note when I moved out. Nothing dramatic, just a sentence. Friendship was the truth you offered. Peace is the truth I'm taking. He didn't respond. For once, he respected silence. A week later, I met Emma for coffee. She looked uneasy, like she'd been carrying something heavy since the last time we spoke. He's not doing great, she said carefully. Moved back in with mom and dad. Keeps talking about how he lost the best thing that ever happened to him. I stirred my coffee slowly. People don't usually realize what they had until they have to clean up after themselves. She gave a sad smile. He's been telling everyone you were the one that got away. That's generous, I said dryly. I didn't get away. He let me go because he thought I'd wait by the door. Emma sighed. He's trying to learn from it, I think. I hope so, I said, just not on my time. The condo felt different at night. Not empty, just unoccupied by performance. I was learning the art of stillness again, reading until 2 a.m., making single portions of pasta, leaving the TV off just to listen to the city breathe. Every so often, I'd catch myself reaching for my phone out of old habit, expecting a text from him. But the only messages that came were from clients or my sister, and they never carried emotional debt. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. The message was short. Daniel, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back. Me, you already did. You just called it honesty. And that was the last time I heard from him. The months that followed unfolded quietly. I adjusted faster than I expected. It's incredible how much space you recover when you stop managing someone else's comfort. I got back into running. I learned how to cook for one without calling it lonely. I bought myself flowers every Friday, lilies, because they don't beg for attention. Every now and then, people asked if I was seeing anyone. I'd shrug and say, I'm seeing progress. It was true. But life, being the strange narrator it is, had a sense of irony. Because that spring, at a small art exhibition my agency had sponsored, I met someone. His name was Ethan Ward, a graphic designer from a local firm. He had the quiet confidence of someone who'd built his piece instead of borrowing it from others. We talked about color palettes and typography, but somewhere between sentences, something clicked. Not the spark of infatuation, but recognition. He asked how long I'd lived in the city. Just moved, I said. New chapter. He smiled. Good ones always start after you stop trying to edit the old ones. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. Over the next few weeks, we crossed paths again. First by accident, then by design. Coffee after meetings. A walk through the design district. Easy conversation. No undertones of rescue or regret. When he finally came over for dinner, he stood in my doorway and looked around like the space itself had something to say. It feels calm, he said. Like someone actually likes being here. I smiled. Someone does. A few nights later, while cleaning, I found the old jewelry box I'd brought from the apartment. The engagement ring I'd returned was gone, of course, but the refund from it had formed part of my condo down payment. I opened the box anyway. Inside was nothing but a folded note, a small piece of stationery that still smelled faintly of bergamot. It was my handwriting from the night I bought the ring. Because love deserves certainty, not convenience. I smiled at how naive and brave that version of me had been. She'd believed in happy endings, but now I understood something better. Closures can be happier than endings. I slipped the note back and closed the lid. That chapter wasn't bitter anymore. It was simply archived. A few months later, I ran into Daniel at a cafe downtown. It was almost cinematic. Morning light, familiar face, the faint trace of disbelief in his eyes. Izzy, he said, as if the name itself carried memory. Daniel, you look good. So do you, I lied politely. We exchanged small talk, the weather, work, things people say when they're standing on the ashes of what used to be intimacy. He hesitated before saying, I never thanked you for everything you did for me, for how patient you were. You don't need to, I said. I wasn't being patient. I was being hopeful. There's a difference. He nodded, swallowing hard. I hope you're happy. I am, I said simply. Are you? He hesitated, trying to be. I gave him a soft smile. Then you're already ahead of where you were. When he left, I felt nothing. No ache, no anger, not even nostalgia. Just the faint hum of closure, steady and warm. That night, I sat on my balcony, a glass of wine in hand, the city stretching beneath me like a quiet confession. For so long, I thought heartbreak was something you survived. Now I knew it was something you refined. Daniel's name didn't hurt anymore. It was just a footnote in a story that had finally balanced its books. I thought of the ring money, the deposit, the mortgage, the space I'd built. How the thing that once symbolized his absence had funded my independence. It was poetic accounting. As the evening breeze moved through the open window, I whispered to myself, sometimes the universe doesn't save you from heartbreak. It just hands you the receipt. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like the supporting character in someone else's life. I was the author again.